I walked through the glass doors of Sterling Manufacturing headquarters, and the security guard didn't even glance at my ID. He knew me. They all knew me. But to the rest of the world, I was just a retired old man visiting his daughter's office. That was the story I had carefully constructed, the lie I had been living for the past 30 years. My name was on the building, but no one knew it. The company was named Sterling Manufacturing, and everyone assumed it was just a coincidence that my last name was also Sterling. I had built this empire from a single lathe machine in my garage, and I had done it all in the shadows, letting my CEO take the credit while I pulled every single string from behind the curtain. But today, that curtain was about to be torn down. Today, my son-in-law was about to learn the truth. Marcus had been working at Sterling Manufacturing for 3 years. He had no idea I owned the company. He had no idea that his promotion, his corner office, his 6-figure salary, and his company car were all gifts I had given him while watching him treat my daughter like an inconvenience. He thought he had earned everything through his own merit. He thought he was a self-made man climbing the corporate ladder. He had no idea that I had been standing at the top of that ladder, watching him climb, waiting for him to show his true colors. And he had shown them, over and over again, every single day for the past 6 years. I walked through the executive lobby, nodding at the receptionist who had been with the company for 20 years. She smiled warmly, as she always did, and I waved back. I took the private elevator to the top floor, the one that required a special key card that only 3 people in the entire company possessed. The doors slid open onto the executive suite, and I stepped out into the hushed, carpeted hallway. I could hear Marcus's voice before I saw him. He was in the conference room, pitching his quarterly report to a room full of executives he had never met before. David Chen, my CEO, was sitting at the head of the table, his face carefully neutral. He knew what was about to happen. We had planned this moment together, weeks in advance, waiting for the perfect opportunity to strike. Before I tell you what happened when I walked into that room, before I reveal how my son-in-law's world came crashing down around him, let me know where you're watching from in the comments below. Hit the like button and subscribe to Vindication if you've ever watched someone underestimate you, only to realize you were the one holding all the power. To understand how we ended up in that conference room, you have to go back 30 years. I was a 25-year-old factory worker who had just been laid off. My wife, Sarah, had just given birth to our daughter, Emily, and we had exactly $500 to our name. I had no college degree, no safety net, and no hope of finding another job in a town where every factory was shutting down. But I had a stubborn refusal to fail, a refusal to let my daughter grow up the way I had grown up, hungry and scared and desperate. I bought a single-used lathe machine with my last $500. I set it up in my garage and began taking small machining jobs for local businesses. I worked 16 hours a day, sleeping on the concrete floor of my garage because I couldn't afford to heat my house. Sarah worked double shifts at a diner to keep food on the table. For years, we scraped by, barely making ends meet, surviving on canned soup and bread that was on clearance. But slowly, painfully, I started to grow. I hired my first employee, a young man who had also been laid off from the factory. Then my second. Then my third. By the time Emily was 10, we had moved into a real factory. By the time she was 18, we had expanded to 3 facilities across the state. By the time she met Marcus, we were one of the largest manufacturing companies in the country, worth over $300 million. But I never let the money change who I was. I still drove the same truck I had bought 15 years ago. I still lived in the same modest house. I still ate dinner at the same kitchen table Sarah and I had bought from a thrift store when we were first married. I didn't want the trappings of wealth. I wanted the freedom that came with it. I wanted to know that my family would never have to struggle the way I had struggled, and I had protected them in the only way I knew how, by staying invisible, by staying in the background, by letting the world believe that Sterling Manufacturing was run by a faceless corporation. I had a CEO, David Chen, who handled the public-facing aspects of the business while I pulled every single string from behind the curtain. It was a system that worked perfectly for 30 years, until Marcus came along. Marcus entered our lives 6 years ago, at Emily's 25th birthday party. He was charming, articulate, and devastatingly handsome. He had an Ivy League degree, a job at a prestigious consulting firm, and a smile that could disarm anyone. He swept Emily off her feet within weeks. I watched their relationship develop from a distance, and I felt a knot of unease in my stomach. There was something about Marcus that didn't sit right with me. He was too smooth, too polished, too eager to talk about his ambitions and his plans. He talked about money constantly, about the kind of life he wanted to build for himself. But he never talked about what he would give, only what he would take. I tried to warn Emily. I invited her out to lunch, just the two of us, and I told her to be careful. I told her that Marcus seemed more interested in status than in substance. She laughed at me. She told me I was being paranoid, that I was just a protective father who didn't want to let go of his little girl. She told me that Marcus was a good man, an ambitious man, a man who would provide for her and give her the life she deserved. She didn't realize that the life she deserved was already hers. She didn't realize that her trust fund alone could support her for the rest of her life. I had never told her about the money. I had never wanted her to be defined by it. I wanted her to find her own path, to build her own identity, to know that she was loved for who she was, not for what she had. But in my efforts to protect her from the corrupting influence of wealth, I had left her vulnerable to someone who saw her as a means to an end. Marcus proposed after 6 months. The engagement was whirlwind, the wedding was lavish, and the marriage was a disaster from the very beginning. Within a year, I started to notice the cracks. Emily was quieter than she used to be. She stopped calling as often. When I visited, I noticed the way Marcus spoke to her, dismissively, condescendingly, as if she were a child who needed to be managed. He made decisions without consulting her. He spent money without asking her. He treated her like an accessory, not a partner. I wanted to intervene. I wanted to confront him, to tell him exactly who I was and what I would do to him if he ever hurt my daughter again. But Sarah, my wife, stopped me. She told me that Emily had to find her own way, that she had to come to us when she was ready. She told me that Marcus would eventually show his true colors, and when he did, we had to be ready. So I waited, and I watched, and I prepared. The opportunity came when Marcus's consulting firm went under. He was devastated, humiliated, desperate for a new job. Emily called me, crying, asking if I knew anyone who could help him. I told her I would make some calls. Then I called David Chen and told him to create a position for Marcus at Sterling Manufacturing. I told him to give Marcus a title that sounded important but had no real authority. I told him to give Marcus a salary that would make him feel successful but wouldn't give him any power. I told him to let Marcus believe that he had earned the job on his own merit, through his own networking, through his own brilliance. And for the next 3 years, Marcus climbed the corporate ladder, completely unaware that the ladder had been built specifically for him. He was promoted 3 times, each promotion carefully orchestrated to make him feel more important, more powerful, more in control. He never questioned why his rise was so meteoric. He never questioned why doors kept opening for him. He simply assumed it was because he was brilliant. And he was brilliant, in a way. But brilliance without humility is just arrogance dressed up in a suit. The turning point came 6 months ago. I had invited Emily and Marcus to dinner at my house, just a quiet family meal. Marcus spent the entire evening on his phone, barely acknowledging Sarah or me. When I asked about his work, he launched into a monologue about how he was the best executive at Sterling Manufacturing, how he was practically running the company, how he was the only one who understood the vision of the leadership team. He laughed at my questions, dismissing them as the musings of an old man who didn't understand the modern business world. He told me that he was going to be CEO one day, that it was only a matter of time, that everyone at the company recognized his talent. I smiled, nodded, and kept my mouth shut. But inside, I was burning. This was the man who was supposed to be taking care of my daughter. This was the man who was supposed to be honoring my legacy. And he had no idea that he was sitting across from the founder of the company he was so desperate to take over. After dinner, I walked Marcus to his car. He was still talking about himself, still bragging about his plans, still completely oblivious to the truth. I put my hand on his shoulder and said, "You know, Marcus, I have a friend at Sterling Manufacturing. A very good friend. He's been there for 30 years. He knows the company inside and out." Marcus looked at me with thinly veiled condescension. "That's nice, Bill. But this is a modern company. The old guard doesn't understand the new economy. Your friend probably doesn't even know how to use a computer." I smiled and said, "You're probably right. Good night, Marcus." He drove away, completely unaware that the man he had just dismissed was the man who signed his paycheck, the man who could take everything away with a single phone call. I went inside and called David Chen. "It's time," I said. "Set up the meeting for next week. Invite all the senior executives. And make sure Marcus is there." David asked me if I was sure, if I was ready for the consequences. I told him I had been ready for 30 years. He told me to come to the meeting as a guest, to sit in the back, to wait for the right moment. And then he would introduce me to the room. The day of the meeting arrived. I walked into Sterling Manufacturing headquarters like I had walked in 1,000 times before, invisible, unnoticed, a ghost in my own empire. I took my seat in the back of the conference room just as Marcus began his presentation. He was in his element, confident and commanding, completely unaware of the danger he was in. He spoke for 30 minutes about his vision for the future, about the changes he wanted to make, about the innovations he would bring to the company. The executives listened politely, their faces carefully neutral. They knew what was coming. They had been preparing for this moment for weeks. When Marcus finished his presentation, he looked at David Chen with a confident smile, expecting praise, expecting validation, expecting the promotion he had been angling for. David Chen stood up slowly, adjusted his tie, and looked directly at Marcus. "Thank you, Marcus. That was a very insightful presentation." Marcus beamed, the arrogance radiating off him like heat from a furnace. David continued, "Before we move on to the Q&A, I'd like to introduce a special guest, a man who has been with this company since the very beginning, a man who knows this organization better than anyone else, a man who has been watching your career with great interest." Marcus looked around the room, confused. He was trying to figure out who the special guest could possibly be. David gestured toward the back of the room. "Bill, would you like to come up here?" I stood up slowly, brushed the wrinkles out of my jacket, and walked toward the front of the room. The executives parted to make way for me, their faces respectful, their eyes knowing. Marcus stared at me, his face draining of color. He looked like he had seen a ghost. David moved aside and gestured for me to stand at the podium. I looked out at the room full of people, all of them watching me, all of them knowing the truth. And then I looked at Marcus, my son-in-law, the man who had been dismissing me, patronizing me, treating me like an irrelevant old man for years. "Good afternoon, everyone," I said, my voice steady and calm. "My name is William Sterling. I am the founder and majority owner of Sterling Manufacturing. I have been running this company for 30 years, and I have been watching Marcus's career for the past 3 years. I wanted to see what kind of man my daughter had married. I wanted to see how he treated people when he thought no one was watching. I wanted to see if he had the humility, the integrity, and the character to be worthy of my legacy." I paused, letting the words sink in. Marcus was trembling now, his hands gripping the edges of the table, his face pale and slick with sweat. And what I saw was a man who treated his wife like an inconvenience, a man who took credit for other people's work, a man who believed his own hype so completely that he forgot there were other people in the room. The silence in the conference room was absolute. I could hear the faint hum of the air conditioning, the distant sound of traffic from the street below, the ragged sound of Marcus's breathing. "You were right about one thing, Marcus," I continued. "You said that I wouldn't understand the modern business world, and you were right. I don't understand it. I don't understand how a man can be so arrogant, so entitled, so completely blind to the people around him, and still believe he deserves to lead. I built this company from nothing. I worked 16-hour days in a freezing garage while my wife worked double shifts at a diner to keep food on the table. I know what it means to sacrifice. I know what it means to struggle. And I know what it means to be humble enough to learn from your mistakes. You have never made a mistake in your life. Have you, Marcus? You have never failed. You have never been wrong. You have never had to start over from nothing." Marcus opened his mouth to speak, but no words came out. He was trapped. He was cornered. And he knew it. "I gave you this job, Marcus. I created your position specifically for you because my daughter asked me to. I gave you a promotion because my daughter told me you were sad about your career. I gave you a corner office and a company car because my daughter told me you felt undervalued. Every single thing you have, Every single success you have achieved was handed to you by the man you have been dismissing at family dinners for the past 6 years. The man you have been condescending to, the man you have been ignoring, the man you have been treating like a senile old fool who doesn't understand the modern world. Marcus's face was a mask of horror. He looked around the room, searching for allies, for anyone who might come to his rescue. But no one moved. No one spoke. He was completely alone. "I want to make something very clear," I said, my voice dropping to a low, dangerous whisper. "You have not earned a single thing in this company. You do not deserve any of the opportunities you have been given. And effective immediately, your employment at Sterling Manufacturing is terminated. You are fired, Marcus. You have exactly 1 hour to clear out your desk and leave the premises." Marcus staggered back, his chair scraping against the floor. He looked at me with a mixture of rage and disbelief. "You can't do this," he sputtered. "I'm a valued employee. I have a contract. I have rights. You can't just walk in here and fire me because of some personal vendetta." I smiled calmly and pulled a single piece of paper from my jacket pocket. "I'm glad you mentioned your contract, Marcus, because I had my legal team review it very carefully. And do you know what I found? There's a clause that allows the majority owner to terminate any employee who has been discovered to have secured their position through fraudulent means. And since you secured this position through a recommendation from your wife, who is my daughter, and since you were unaware that the recommendation came from the majority owner, you obtained your position under false pretenses. I can terminate you with cause, and I will." Marcus looked like he was going to be sick. He had been so careful, so calculating, so certain that he was the smartest person in the room. And now, in a matter of minutes, everything he had built had been ripped away from him. "You can't do this," he said again, his voice cracking. "I'm her husband. I'm your family. How could you do this to me?" I looked at him, truly looked at him, and I felt nothing but pity. "Family?" I said softly. "You stopped being family the moment you started treating my daughter like she was beneath you. You stopped being family the moment you dismissed my wife at her own dinner table. You stopped being family the moment you proved to me that you were just another predator who saw my daughter as a ticket to a better life. I have been watching you for 6 years, Marcus, and I have seen every single thing you have done. The way you speak to Emily, the way you spend her money, the way you isolate her from her friends and family. You are not a husband. You are a parasite." Security guards appeared at the door, summoned by a silent signal from David. They approached Marcus with professional calm, ready to escort him out of the building. Marcus began to scream, to protest, to threaten legal action, to promise revenge. But his words fell on deaf ears. He had spent so long believing his own lies that he couldn't see the truth when it was staring him in the face. As he was led out of the conference room, I called out to him. "One more thing, Marcus. Emily knows everything. She knows who I am. She knows what I did. And she is filing for divorce. Your lawyer will be receiving the paperwork within the hour." Marcus's face went pale, completely devoid of color. "You can't do that," he whispered. "She loves me. She would never leave me." I shook my head sadly. "She stopped loving you a long time ago, Marcus. She was just waiting for me to finally step in and set her free." He was gone. The security guards led him out of the conference room, out of the executive suite, out of the building he had thought he was going to take over. The executives filed out quietly, one by one, leaving me alone in the silent conference room. I stood at the podium, looking out over the empty chairs, and I allowed myself to feel the full weight of what I had just done. I had protected my daughter. I had removed a predator from her life. I had finally taken off my mask and revealed the truth. But I also felt a profound sadness. I had spent 30 years building a legacy that I had hoped to pass down to someone worthy. I had hoped that my son-in-law would be that person, that he would respect my daughter, that he would honor my legacy. Instead, he had turned out to be just another person who saw my family as a means to an end. I walked out of the conference room and took the elevator down to the lobby. Emily was waiting for me, her eyes red with tears, her hands trembling. She hugged me tightly, and I felt her body shake with sobs. "Thank you, Dad," she whispered. "Thank you for saving me." I held her close and told her that she had saved herself. She was the one who had finally had the courage to walk away. I had just given her the push she needed. 6 months have passed since that day in the conference room. Marcus is gone, completely out of our lives. The divorce was finalized quickly and quietly, with no drama, no legal battles, no drawn-out court proceedings. He walked away with nothing, just as he had walked into our lives with nothing. Emily is living with Sarah and me now, rebuilding her life, rediscovering who she is without the weight of a toxic marriage dragging her down. She has started her own business, a small boutique that sells handmade goods, and she is happier than I have ever seen her. David Chen is still running the company, and we have started a new initiative to promote from within, to find people with character and integrity, not just people with charm and ambition. I have learned that the most dangerous people are the ones who are the best at pretending. And I have learned that the greatest gift you can give your children is not money or status or power. It is the freedom to be themselves, without fear, without judgment, without the crushing weight of expectations. I used to think that building Sterling Manufacturing was my greatest achievement, but I was wrong. My greatest achievement was my daughter. My greatest achievement was watching her find the strength to walk away from a man who was destroying her. My greatest achievement was being there for her when she finally needed me. Family is not defined by blood. It is defined by loyalty, by sacrifice, by the willingness to stand up for the people you love, even when it's easier to look away. I had spent 30 years building a company from nothing. I had spent 6 years watching my son-in-law destroy my daughter's spirit. And I had spent one afternoon taking everything back. A lone wolf might lose his mate, but he never loses his teeth. And that day, in that conference room, my son-in-law found out exactly what happened when you tried to bite the hand that fed you. I walked beside my daughter through the darkest days, thinking we would never see the light. Every tear that she had shed, every sleepless night, every fight, I watched her slowly disappear, fading into the man she called her husband. I knew I had to step in, to finally take a stand. I knew I had to show her that her father would never let her fall. He thought he was invincible, thought he had won the game. He never knew the power of the man behind the name. He thought he climbed the ladder with his talent and his pride, never knowing I built the ladder with my blood and sweat and time. I am my daughter's father, and I always will remain. Through every triumph, every loss, through every joy and every pain. I taught her how to stand up tall, to never back down from a fight. And when the storm came crashing in, I held her through the night. They say that blood is thicker than the water in the stream, but blood can also poison you, can take away your dreams. I choose to build a legacy of loyalty and trust, of standing by the ones you love, even when it's tough. I have no anger in my heart, no bitterness, no spite. I simply took my power back and stepped into the light. Forgiving doesn't mean you let them hurt you once again. It means you set the burden down and let the healing finally begin. I am stronger than the battles I have fought along the way. I am braver than the lies that others tried to make me say. I carry love inside my heart, a fire in my soul. I watched my daughter find her strength, and now she's in control. The world may change around me. The stars may fade above. But I will always carry with me the strength of selfless love. And when they ask me who I am, I'll smile and answer softly. I am not defined by him. I am defined by what I overcame. I am vindicated.